Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandom at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me tell you all about it. First of all, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. So download the free Anchor app now or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Thanks for listening to the Pigskin Tales podcast. This story was written and produced by your host, Ross Bliley. If you like this story, please provide feedback on Twitter at Pigskin Tales or on Facebook at Ross's Fancast. Want to help support me monetarily? I also have a link on Patreon. Any monies given in support of my work goes towards the purchase of new equipment.
He was considered one of the grittiest men in a purple uniform in the 60s and 70s. His toughness, durability, and loyalty earned him a spot on the list of the 50 greatest players in franchise history. He is one of the few, the proud, the honored members of a short list of professional athletes to come out of North Dakota. He is deemed North Dakota nice to everyone he met. This is Pigskin Tales, the story of Dave, the Cando Flash, Osborn.
Dave Osborn was raised on a farm on the outskirts of a little town in North Dakota known as Cando. Cando's population in the 1950s was around 1,800 residents. And if you remember the television show as well as the book written by Laura Ingalls Wilder, The Little House on the Prairie, then you'd know exactly how Dave Osborn grew up. Since the family didn't own a television, they instead worked hard at raising cattle and horses, grew grain for money and food, and the children attended a one-room schoolhouse from grades 1 through 8. Dave did graduate high school, but not before he endured some life challenges. In September of 1956, about the time he was in 9th grade, he wanted to try out for sports, but he couldn't pass his sports physical. The doctor told him he had a heart murmur, and so he concluded to become the student manager for the football team. The next season, he bulked up, became a lot faster. He was able to pass his sports physical and play football. All went well until his junior season when it was cut short due to a major snowstorm. Osborn recalls the story in a newspaper article written in the Devil's Lake Journal back in November of 2011. I remember my junior year when there was a snowstorm and the opponent didn't show up. The rest of the season was canceled after just 4 or 5 games. In the book Vikings 50 All-Time Greatest Players in Franchise History, which was written by Jim Bruton and with contributions from Fran Tarkenton, Osborn gave details about he and his childhood friends playing the game of pump, pump, pull away. His friends couldn't catch him. He would duck, dodge, and spin his way around them, but he was so fast that they could just not get him. He goes on to say that, "I was pretty fast. I was always pretty fast. Even as a kid, I could outrun most of my friends. In fact, I'm told that my grandfather was a fast runner. My dad was fast, my kids are fast, and my grandkids are fast too. It's just in our genes. It's not something that can be taught. It's either you have it or you don't. By 1962, the Cando Flash had earned himself a scholarship to play football for the University of North Dakota. He helped the team earn a 9-1 record in 1964 and an NCC title. He was also named Most Valuable Player while cementing a spot on the All-North Central Conference team in 1964. After exhausting all avenues of online research for his statistics at UND, I'm actually not able to inform you of his performance. However, I can assure you that he played well enough to become not only a North Dakota legend, but also a Minnesota legend. He was drafted into the National Football League as a running back to play for the Minnesota Vikings in the spring of '65. As a rookie with the Vikings, Osborn recalls how volatile Coach Van Brocklin was. A lot of us made a point on game day to stay as far away from Van Brocklin as we could. According to Mark Craig, an author of the book 100 Things Vikings Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die, Osborn also remembers a time when Van Brocklin gave him his big break. As the story goes, the coach looked around to see whom he could replace the injured Tommy Mason with. "Osborn!" he yelled. The Cando Flash ran up there and vividly remembers thinking, "Boy, oh boy, am I going to get a good encouragement?" When Van Brocklin wrapped his big arm around him and said, "Get in there and see what you can F up." Not exactly what you were expecting, were you? Neither was I. Coach pushed him onto the field. He stumbled but made it into the huddle. 12 seasons later, he was still out there. During his time with the Vikings, he earned a trip to the Pro Bowl in '71. If you ask him, I believe he would say the one Pro Bowl trip is pretty insignificant to playing in the Super Bowl, and just playing in the Super Bowl is insignificant to actually winning the Lombardi Trophy. Osborn played with the Vikings through the '75 season and then was abruptly traded to the Green Bay Packers for one season. He formally retired from professional football after the 1976 season. Shortly thereafter, the University of North Dakota honored him with retiring his number 41 jersey and enshrining him into the North Dakota Sports Hall of Fame in 1992. He was also selected to join one of 3 fellow UND alumni to the Sports Illustrated Top 50 Sports Figures of the 20th Century. Now, statistically, Osborn gained 4,336 yards rushing on 1,179 attempts in 143 NFL games, but he also scored 29 times, caught 173 passes for 1,412 yards, and scored 7 receiving touchdowns. He became a fan favorite back in the mid-'60s because of his toughness, durability, and straight-ahead bulldozing style of running. He and Bill Brown complemented each other very, very well. Life after football continued with working in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. At first, in the off-season, he worked for the St. Paul Pioneer Press as a retail advertisement salesman. Then he decided to become a car salesman and eventually owned his own dealership. Later, he worked as a salesman for an office machine company and finally retired as a landscaper. Today, Mr. Osborn, known to some as the Cando Flash and to others as Rocky, is 77 years old. He frequently keeps in shape by walking 4 or 5 miles a day. He lives in Lakeville, Minnesota, and sometimes hunts ducks and geese with former Minnesota Vikings head coach Bud Grant. Thanks for listening to the Pigskin Tales podcast. This story was written and produced by your host, Ross Bliley. Edited by Nikki Bliley. The soundtrack was provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io. Sources of information were researched online at googlebooks.com, grandforksherald.com, devilslakejournal.com, ProFootballReference.com, SAEUND.org, and a book I actually purchased titled 100 Things Vikings Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die by Mark Craig. We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.